it'll sanitize the chiller, and it'll also add copper to the beer. I don't like doing that because you have this soft tubing here that would be very susceptible to melting basically at extreme temperatures. And also too, when you got these things hanging here and you got the flame all around the burner, you're gonna fry your hoses. You fry your hoses, you're gonna have water running through them, and it's gonna start spraying water into your finished beer, which would, I can't imagine being 7 or 8 hours into a really, really nice beer and then these lines start leaking and just destroy everything you've worked for. So I just bypass that whole thing, and I will actually sanitize everything, and then once the wort is done boiling, I'll add this and just let it kind of hang out for a minute or two before we start cooling it down. And that should pass off enough copper in there to kind of boost the yeast a little bit. Now, just as far as fermenters go, in home brewing, you're really not dealing with conical fermenters. Some guys do. They're a lot more hardcore than I am as far as that goes. But what you're typically going to see are these plastic ale pails or these glass carboys. Okay, glass carboys are ubiquitous with home brewing. Most of us have a lot of them if you brew in any kind of a regular basis. But the idea of a conical fermenter is, and I'll just explain this in case you're interested in building one yourself, and there are products that create your carboy into an inverted conical tank basically, but the idea is as the beer is fermenting, you have what's called trub settling onto the bottom of the fermenter, okay, and that's going to be dead yeast cells, live yeast cells, it's going to be hops. And we're going to talk about how to get as much as the hops out of the beer before you rack into your fermenter as possible, but you're not going to get all of it. There's going to be little pieces of grain hull. There's going to be all kinds of stuff, so we just call that trub, and you're going to get a layer of stuff in the bottom of your fermenter. Now, the idea is you want to separate the nice clean beer from that stuff so it doesn't impart off flavors into your beer. You can do that one of two ways. If you're using ale pails like this or carboys like this, you're going to get a siphon, and you're actually going to transfer your beer off the top of that trub bed into another container, and then you're just going to dump that trub away. Okay, the idea of a conical tank is you have this cone shape, so all of that trub is going to be settling into the bottom of that cone. Okay, and then they have a valve on the bottom that you can open up and drain away the trub, and then as soon as the clear beer starts coming out, you just close it. So instead of actually transferring the beer from one container to another, you're just removing the trub and then closing it again. So that's pretty cool. So you need one container instead of two. Those are your fermentation options. For me, it's just kind of more sensical to use these cheap ale pails and carboys and stuff and just rack them around like everybody else does. So I'm going to go ahead and add my iodophore, and in this case, 1 cap full of this stuff will sanitize 5 gallons of water, or make 5 gallons of water into a sanitizing solution. So I'm going to go ahead and add about 1.5 capfuls just to be on the safe side. You know, this is like 7 gallons probably. So we're going to go ahead and add this. Just fill it on up with water. After it's sat for 2 minutes, it's ready to go. So we're going to let it sit a whole lot longer than that. A lot of guys, including myself, will just kind of leave stuff sit in iodophore until you're ready to use it. I mean, it's just a good practice to keep microbes from building up. But the reason I wanted to take so much time to talk about this specifically is sanitization is critical for beer brewing. I mean, if you're not cleaning things up and you're introducing other species of yeast into beers, there's some species of yeast that are very ravenous, that are very actually hard to eradicate. Some of the lambic yeasts, if you're into that kind of stuff, you're probably more of an advanced brewer anyway, but some of those strains of yeast are very difficult to get rid of, so you should be aware of that coming in. So iodophore is a great product to be familiar with. There's another one called Sandstar. You can use regular old bleach and water too if you're real careful about removing all of it. But the idea is be mindful of just getting everything sanitized and follow through on it, and don't skip those steps. So I'm going to get off the soapbox on that one, but you know, just put it under your cap. So okay, so we got 15 minutes left in the boil. We just added our flavor hops. So we just added another, it's a little shy of a ½ ounce of Amarillo. And this is smelling pretty awesome by now. It's looking pretty awesome. I'll just kind of show you some of the color here. I don't know if you can see this, but it's nice and like a copper brown, whatever. It'll be a really good tasting beer. But what you don't want to skip is this Irish moss. Okay, now a lot of you guys, if you're looking at a beer recipe for the first time, you're probably wondering what in the hell Irish moss is, why you need it, can I skip it, what does it do? Irish moss probably isn't Irish, and it certainly isn't moss. Basically, it's a fining agent. And what it literally does is it binds to particulate stuff floating around in the beer and sinks it. Okay, so you can have a lot of stuff floating around in your beer, grain hull, pieces of hops, stuff like that. It's basically just going to stick to them, make them sink to the bottom of the boil kettle. You'll see when the beer is done here that we're going to have a lot of stuff settled on the bottom. We're going to get rid of most of the hops before this ever even goes into a fermenter. And also too, Irish moss, just so you know, is actually algae. It grows on top of the ocean. And it's a few different things put together, and you add it during the last 15 minutes of the boil of beer. If you forget to do it, there's another product called gelatin. It's not like Jello. Don't put Jello in your beer. But it does the same thing. It's going to bind the stuff inside of the beer, settle it down, and then you can rack it. Racking is what we call when you siphon a beer from one vessel into another with the idea that you're leaving behind sediment or trub. Okay, so we're going to end up with a nice clear beer. We got one more hop addition here that's going to go in just as we're turning off the gas. It says to boil for 1 to 2 minutes. We're not even going to do that. We're just literally going to cut the fire, throw it right in, give it a little bit of a stir, and then we're going to dunk in our chiller. So we'll see you guys back for that one. Just put in the last of our hops. This will be the aroma hop addition. This is what you're actually going to get in your nose when you raise the beer to your face. And we are done. We got the gas turned off, and we are ready to run this down to our chiller to break down our wort as quickly as possible. Here we go. Okay, so what do you guys think? Should we have like a wort carrying Olympics? That was a good run. Whew. Okay, so now we have our immersion chiller that's been sitting in our itophore for at least 45 minutes, and we're just gonna kind of shake off all that we can. And go ahead and just lower it down into our boil kettle here. And again, what we were talking about before is that copper will impart some minerals into the wort for the yeast to consume when we pitch the yeast in there. So we're just going to kind of let this hang out for a minute. Some guys will actually take a piece of copper if they don't use an immersion chiller like this and boil it in there. They'll just take a little chunk of pipe, throw it into the boil kettle for a few minutes, and it does the same exact thing. Some guys use what's called a counterflow chiller, which is basically two hoses, a big one and a small one, and you're passing the wort through the inside one, and the outside one has cold water running around it. It's the same idea. You're just chilling down your wort. And then there's also a product from a company called Blickman called the Therminator that just plunges the temperature down. Now, when we turn this water on, as I explained before, this thing is literally just going to drop the temperature like crazy. It's awesome. Don Osborne had a great suggestion for taking this and sticking it right into your washing machine. I got a bucket of itophore on top of there right now that I need to drain out before I can do that. And yeah, whatever, I'm not doing any laundry today, so that's not going to happen. But in the summer, I also like to take this, and as water's coming off the end of it, I'll just stick my finger over the end and spray it, and I'll use that to spray out the inside of my mash tun. But we got a foot of snow outside right now, so that's not going to happen. But I'm going to go ahead and fire this thing up now. I think this has sat long enough. If you want to walk over here a little bit. So, as you can see, you don't need to run this thing crazy hard. In fact, just a dribble will do. Just enough to just pass some water. Now, I don't know if you can see this in the shot, but this water itself is super steamy. I mean, this is going to be pretty close to the same exact temperature as what's inside of there. Now, as that's running through, what's going to happen is you got all these particulates in there. You got, this one was a fairly small hop addition just because we had a fairly high alpha acid hop here. But there is about 2 ounces of hops floating around in there. And this is what's going to be called a cold break. Okay, so basically as the wort is chilling, the particulates that are suspended will bind with that Irish moss and just sink right on down to the bottom. Okay, so by the time this is down to a pitching temperature, which should be anything under 70 degrees, and in this case we're using a Kolsch yeast. Usually people that are going to be making a steam beer are going to use California common yeast. And what's interesting about California common yeast is that it's somewhere right between a lager and an ale. Okay, it's supposed to be fermented about